Hey, good morning, everybody. So I just finished doing a test fit on this sliding hanging bike storage system that I've got back here. Now this is obviously inspired by the stashed space rail storage system, which is pretty pricey and, to be honest, a little bit out of reach for my needs. And I also have to give credit to the Joy of Bike channel, who was one of the first to show us that we can basically make one of these on our own for pretty cheap. In this video, my contribution to the repository of DIY bike storage hacks, and I'll show you how I built this sliding storage system for 6 bikes for about 80 bucks. I'll include a parts list down below in case you want to replicate this system exactly. But first I actually need to take all the bikes down so I can make some final adjustments on the sliding trolley things before I can put all the bikes back and be done. Okay, so basically it's just 6 of these. These are 3D printed little trolley things that I designed and then just printed out using PETG. Now, obviously one of the main concerns is whether or not the plastic 3D printed part is going to be strong enough to support the weight of a full-size bike. In my testing so far, it's been absolutely fine. I basically kind of pulled down almost with all my body weight on one of these, and it was perfectly fine. So I think the concern of using a 3D printed trolley is really kind of a non-issue, especially if you design it well and if you print using proper settings. So in my case here, I'm using a lot of wall layers, basically 6 wall layers and about 60% gyroid infill. I printed in this orientation so that as it got to the bearing pins, we'll call them, each layer was basically a layer that went all the way through the entire body of the trolley. Now the bearings, these are just standard 608 bearings. I basically harvested these just around the garage from old skate bearings and skateboard bearings, and the diameter of these pins was designed to be sort of an interference fit. So all you really have to do is to just press the bearing on, and it's pretty solidly on there. Like, it really takes a lot of effort to pull the bearings off. And because there's no axial forces going through the bearings, and because the bearings themselves are sort of captured within the interior of the channel, there's really no concern for the bearings falling off. The other piece to it is I'm using the Park Tool heavy duty bicycle storage hook. This is a M10. Let's see, what is this? Yeah, M10 threaded shaft here, because I didn't want to use the wood screws into the 3D printed part. What's nice about these is you just put the threaded shaft through the 10mm hole and put a nut on either side. And actually, one of the reasons I pulled all the trolleys down is because I want to Loctite the upper and lower nut so that the hook is allowed to swivel, but the nut isn't going to like work its way loose. So a couple of these I've already put Loctite on. This is one example, and these, yeah, I mean, these nuts just, they're not going anywhere. I considered doing a security nylon nut on top, which I may still do, but I honestly feel like the Loctite is going to be plenty sufficient. So it'll look like that. And then we'll just screw that down. I'm kind of just snugging the nuts down, basically just so that there's very little play, but not so tight that the hook doesn't spin freely. All right, now while those kind of set up for a second, kind of give you an overview of how this works. This is just a 2x4. The primary support is just a 2x4. The Unistrut, which is something you can get at any hardware store, I'll put a link down below, but this is your standard 1 5/8 Unistrut. This came in a 10-foot length, and it costs like 38 bucks at the local big box store. And I just chopped it down to 7 feet because that's about the amount of space that I had. I didn't go all the way to the end over there because my wife wants to do like a garage refrigerator in that space. So I left a few feet on the end here. And these just screw into the bottom of the 2x4 using lag bolts, which I'll put a link to for the exact size that I used. I've got this Unistrut secured to the bottom of this 2x4 with 7 equally spaced lag bolts all the way down the 2x4. And then the support structure above the 2x4, that's sort of the tricky part, and that's what's going to be unique to everybody's situation. So on the right side here, I've actually got the 2x4. It looks pretty precarious, like it's just balancing there, but it's actually secured to another 2x4 that's bolted straight into the top of the shelving structure. So this end of the 2x4 is actually quite secure. This side was slightly different story. So I wanted to do kind of like a hanging system. So I've got these garage rafters up here. I went ahead and used 2 2x4s using lag bolts on either side as sort of a hanging support. The main support 2x4 goes straight into those 2x4 supports using these lag bolts here. And then these two 2x4s, this one here is primarily just to provide lateral support so that the rail can't sway laterally, and that's secured into the wall using like a fence post anchor, and then also screwed into one of these vertical hanging supports. And then this last 2x4 here on the end is mostly just for aesthetics. I just didn't want like a protruding 2x4 and a metal rail just kind of jutting out there. So the big question was, basically how strong is this? I did some calculations based on known properties for this size lag bolt, and then kind of did a little bit of back of the envelope calculation on how much weight a 2x4 can support in this sort of vertical plane. I mean, everything that I calculated said that I'd be fine for, way more than 6 bikes. And so I can jump up on here, and I'm basically a point load, so I'm 160 pounds applied at a single point. And you can see it's pretty good. It's like, it's not going anywhere. I'm not sure I can even do a pull-up. Yeah, this is what gave me like a ton of confidence that this system would work. Now, one thing that I did learn through this process is that if you imagine the walls, just the two parallel walls, the vertical walls of the Unistrut, those are supposed to be perfectly vertical and parallel with each other. In my case here, they're not quite perfect. And so I designed the trolley assuming that the Unistrut was going to be perfect. Because it's imperfect, just slightly, the original trolley design that I had, which basically took up the entire gap between the two rails, it actually ended up binding a lot, so it wouldn't roll smoothly, and it was just kind of upsetting. So I actually redesigned the trolleys to have this notch cut out on this side. A little bit tricky to see there, but yeah, you can see it right there. And what that did for me is it gave me enough clearance on the side that was sort of canted inward so that it basically just wasn't binding anymore. So now when I hang one of these up, it just slides a lot more freely. Oh, this one's actually a lot heavier than I thought. Yeah, this orange Velotric, this has to be more than 40, 45 pounds maybe easily. So yeah, that's 6 bikes on a 7-foot rail. I honestly don't think putting a 7th hook on here would be wise. The whole point of this is to be able to move bikes aside and get out any bike you want at any given time. The depth of the rail should be a minimum of 22 inches. So in my case, from the bottom of the hook to the floor, 78 inches. The biggest bike that I have is a medium Santa Cruz Hightower. If you look at the floor, there's probably still 6 inches of space below the tire of the Santa Cruz. If you ride a large or an extra large, that's obviously going to extend the wheelbase a little bit. So you might consider designing it such that the bottom of the hook to the floor is, maybe 78. If you have a really big bike, maybe you want 80 inches between the bottom of the hook and the floor. And then the very last thing to do to finish off this build is to make sure that these bikes can't just like slide off of the rail. So we just need to screw in a little stopper here. Okay, so what I found here, a headset top cap from something. I don't remember what this was from. And then just this looks like a 20 millimeter headset spacer. We're just gonna go with a 2.5 inch wood screw that'll just go right up into the Unistrut, into the 2x4 above. There we go. That's what that end support looks like with the 20 mil headset spacer and a top cap with a 2.5 inch wood screw just going up into the support there. So there you go, a do-it-yourself sliding, hanging bike storage system for under $100 US. Now again, I know there are some products out there that do this in a sort of prepackaged manner. They're just very expensive. I priced out a stashed space rail for 6 bikes and it came out to $700, and that was just bare minimum, like a ceiling mount with no additional brackets or anything like that. It's essentially the same concept. There's some nice bells and whistles that come with it. But honestly, for under $100, this basically performs the same task, and I've saved a whole bunch of money. I also forgot, of course, that you need 4 608 bearings per trolley. In my case, I had a bunch just lying around. If you have to buy bearings, of course, that's going to be an additional cost as well. So I think that's everything. If you have any questions about my experience designing this, or if you want the STL files for these trolleys, I can share those as well if you're interested in building your own. All right, well, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Again, if you have any questions, just drop them down below. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, see you next time.